Oh, it's recording. Hey, this is Dion. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing my friend Karen. And I'm really curious what her insights will be because I have come to a point where I feel like I don't know what to do. And I don't know really if I need to do anything. But what I want to do is just promote conversation, to promote trying to just understand each other and respect each other. And the respect that I'm looking for is just respecting what a person is saying and that that person is being able to say it in a non-aggressive way where they're not pushing anything on you, but just speaking from their own selves and so that it can be a back and forth of understanding. And I don't know, I'm feeling a little bit down, I must say. So I think she's going to lift my spirits. I think Karen is going to um, be able to shed some light. She's one of my smart friends. I hope you enjoy.
Can you see me?
Yeah,
Hi, wait,
I
let
do.
me change this. How are you, honey? Let me do this, change this, my name. It says my daughter's name.
I know, like, oh, be a Bella.
I know.
No, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm happy to talk to you today. I've been going.
Yeah, I am too. Wait, your lighting's good. Let me get better lighting here.
Yeah,
Make a,
I
a
can't.
shadow. Hold
Your
on.
background.
Let me get my,
Okay.
my, my light
Wow, you got some lots of library going on there. Awesome.
on. Is that better?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's weird. I'm not kidding. Let me turn this. Nope, that's worse. That's slightly better. Do you have like some light on you? Is that what it is?
You know, it's taken me a while to figure it out, but I have a lamp now that I put, it's like behind my computer, but
Yeah.
because this is like the sun's coming through from the back, same as you. Our
Yeah.
background is really bright.
I have one of the, hold on, I'll get one. Well, I guess it doesn't matter.
Well,
If
if
I,
you
'cause
want to.
I have a light. Hold on.
Okay, yeah. It's cute though. She's got a cute room. I see a bowling pin and some yarn. Maybe somebody knits some things there. This is like I Spy with my evil eye. Some beautiful books, some old clocks, some pictures. So cool. Just being able to see in somebody's world a little bit,
That's
to
actually
their
good.
personal life. Oh,
There we go. That's a little better, right?
yeah. Yeah. You almost look superimposed. So do I guess.
This light, yeah, that's okay. That's lighting is everything, isn't it? There we go.
Lighting.
That's better.
Yeah.
Okay, so oh wait, and let me plug this back in. Hi, Dion.
Yeah, that's great. Hi. Hey, Karen. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today. And I'm going to actually put on just a timer just in case because I don't want it to go for too long. I know you're a busy woman,
We all
as
are.
am
All
I.
of us are. Yes.
So I'm going to just put that on there. And yeah, so thank you so much for joining me. I've started to have kind of like a show, but it's not really anything yet. But I'm calling it My Friends Are Smart.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I just wanted to start having important conversations that have been missing in my life. And I think maybe the lives of others, but I'm not even going to go there. I'm doing this for me, and I'm doing this because I think, you know, everybody's own individual enlightenment can really start spreading the fire of knowledge and peace and all of those things.
Definitely. Wise conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really needed in this time. It's really,
It'll be fun because I was talking to a friend this morning and she said, so I hope that this, is something that has value for you and other people, because she said,
Of course.
Karen, I've known you for years, and every time I talk to you, she said, I feel like I have to put on like a different cap, like thinking, she's like, and I said, I don't want to speak in platitudes, or, I think it's so important to communicate. And I
Yeah.
guess the best way to do that is just to be as clear as you can be, in yourself, and as aware, and try to, communicate in the clearest way possible.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, trying to, like, what we do, like in a spiritual way, right, is we're trying to take away layers of the maha, of like the what we've built around ourselves that we think is true, but it's not. So we're like trying to strip away all these layers and
Yeah.
just be clear with ourselves, and then to be able to get that information as clearly as possible to others. It's funny because I was reading Osho this morning, and he's just saying, it's almost impossible. And I don't want
Mm, 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 mm,
make it seem like it's impossible, but for one being to be able to share themselves with another without anything
mm,
in the way of their
mm,
understanding,
mm, mm.
it's going to be it's a challenge, but it's a lovely challenge.
Right. And I think, like, when you do have like you are and I are, have this kind of loftier goals in life, meaning like having spirituality in the forefront, or self-development, or whatever you want to call it. And then, yeah, you got to live in the real world. And but those issues, I think it's almost like, I love this practice of meditation I've been doing. It's a mindfulness where you use the entire world as your meditation. So instead of like sitting on the, you can sit and do a very formal practice where you're just, kind of sitting on the mat, and you're kind of, tuning into your awareness and mindfulness. But the difference of using everything more externally, like, in other words, not escaping, or not negating, and using, like, even these things, personality, current events, like all of those things can be part of the meditation, because you're mindful. When there's an equanimity that you bring to everything, that's mindfulness.
Wow.
So it's not like, oh, well, this is spiritual, like,
Right. It's
doing
like,
yoga. Oh,
you
this is
have to be
spiritual.
spiritual when the temperature is perfect and there's no outside
Yeah.
noises and my whole life is peaceful, then I can do yoga.
Or that's spiritual, like, oh, I'm spiritual when I'm in the Himalayas, or I'm spiritual when I'm, you know um, doing, yoga, or whatever it is. And it's like, it all like, from a kind of bigger, it's when it's met with an awareness, then it's all spiritual, and then we're not like hijacked, right?
Right. Because
So anyway.
this is our playing field. This is our
Right.
life. So for us to
Right.
take ourselves out of the situation of our life and be peaceful isn't
Yeah.
really that helpful for us or anybody else, right?
That's right. And I think that's like real maturity in spirituality, because I know when I started on my, whatever that means, for me personally, spiritual path, it was like when I started meditating, when I started reflecting and things like that. And that was a really beautiful phase. But I think I thought there was an idea of it, that it meant like being peaceful all the time. And it meant, you know, yeah, like, just and there was an idea of maintaining a certain, it's like, I call it the yoga teacher voice. Like, when yoga teachers, especially new yoga teachers, when they go into a class, like, normally they're talking like me, and then all of a sudden they're like, okay, and I'm like, you don't talk like that, like, it's because they feel it's like, now I'm putting my spiritual, and it's all, there's a humor in all of it. But I think the maturity part is, what is the value that it has in everyday life
Hmm.
for you and others, like for me and others, like that's really like putting the metal to the road, right? Where it's like, if you get off the mat and you're still an ass, um that's probably fine. That's some information that might be useful.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'll be honest here. When I was in college and I was just starting off on a yoga journey, I would take a yoga class and I would get out of class and smoke a cigarette afterward.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't
Yeah.
think that it was almost like I was trying to balance it. Well, like, I did something good here, so now I can do
Mm-hmm.
something bad here and it's going to like even out. But
Yeah.
that's just not that's not serving me or my body or the whole purpose of what I'm trying to do. So, I mean, I quit
Yeah.
cigarettes a long time ago. I honestly can't even breathe secondhand smoke now. I'm like one of those people who's like,
Yeah.
if you're smoking around me, I'm like, ew, I can't breathe.
And yet there was something like important probably there too, because when you look at like that maturity, you know, you probably worked through whatever that layer was that was, you know, the smoking, whatever, you know what I mean? Like the equanimity is that like even the masters, like, you know, Osho or people like that, they get to a point, I'm not saying I'm there, but where, you know, they say the masters can drink poison and it doesn't affect them. And
Mm,
that's because they have a sense of equanimity. And I think
yes.
that's like, that's the fun place to play, where it's not like, because you can judge yourself and say, I'm vegan now, so like I'm so spiritual and I'm so evolved. And it's like, are you, if that's what you're saying about it? You know what I mean? It's like
Mm,
if you're doing it because it's like, I'm just doing this because it's good for my body, and you know, it's coming from a place of like of equanimity versus judgment.
yeah.
So I think that's, and that it is harder because it doesn't have those, we like structure, I think, when it comes to things. We're used to that, you know, so we like to know this is what this looks like and we can
Hmm.
follow that. But spirituality is so open, you know, it's so open that you have to, like one of the really great teachers, Neem Karoli Baba, he said, his students always said he never taught anything. He never said, do this, do that. He didn't, you know, he said, do whatever you want. This is the Westerners. And they were like, oh my God, like, what do we do with that? Because he knew that if in their center, if in their core, there was this looking for that equanimity, that, you know, kind of, that, but they had to go through those layers. And so I think it kind of ties into what we're going to talk about today, because I think that like when you look at the world and what's being like blown up right now, you know, whether it's the virus and people's feelings around that, or what's happening with race, what's happening with the LGBT, like there's all these like things that are all, which is what a gift.
Yes, there's so many things being brought up right now, and it's good to concentrate on one. And if you're like a Black Lives Matter person, then like concentrate on that. But there are so many things being brought up, and yes, what a gift. I love that you said that, because it's all being like lifted up, it's all coming into the conversation, and this is why we can talk about it, and it's all important. And
Yeah.
everybody has a different thing that they're fighting for and wanting to solve and do a little better with.
And I
So
think the opportunity, Dion, is that it comes back to this, I just thought of as you were saying it, that it comes back to like these basic, really important questions. Who am I? Why am I here?
okay.
You know, all of those. So even if you're talking about race, okay, so we're going to talk about that, you know, this construct of race and how it's affected, you know, many people's realities, mine and yours included, in different ways, because it really goes at that core of who am I? And like in my own personal unwinding and unpacking of this whole thing, it's really taking those layers of the onion and looking at each layer and helping to kind of, for me to clarify, yeah, who am I, you know, and what does that mean? So you probably have some questions or direction you want to go in. So
Well,
this wasn't it. This was like the breakout session beginning.
this is what I love, though. This is what I wanted. I do. I mean, I have some questions for you, but I just wanted to let you talk. I just
Yeah.
honestly wanted to hear what you're going through and what you think is
Yeah.
helpful and all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And once we discuss a little bit
Yeah.
about that, I do have a very specific question that I'm trying to work through to find an
Okay.
answer about. But first,
Okay.
I just want you to talk about your background, just very
Yeah.
quickly introduce, because you were telling me yesterday how cool
Yeah.
the way that you grew up was.
Right. And I wanted to thank you for having this conversation, because I think it's really, really, and I think it's important, you know, I think it's like having dialogue and understanding. It's just, I think we need more of it,
Yeah.
you know, like you go to Rage Book, I call it. It's Rage Book. It's not called Facebook. and there's no conversation really happening. Or, I mean, I shouldn't say that. There is an opportunity for conversation. you have to really just kind of find ways to break through. And I
Yeah.
think it's just a venting. People like to vent, and people are confused. And anyway, so my background, I think I told you a little bit about it. I mean, it was funny because I started writing down some things we talked, but like, I think growing up, let's see, how can I say this? Of course, like everybody, I don't think I thought of any like racial identity when I was very little, because, you just don't think about it. Right. And then I grew up, I think I told you, and then, which I didn't know. I just knew it was the only neighborhood I knew. So I didn't have anything to compare it to, but it was, you know, as I talk about it now, it was an all white community, an affluent community in New York State, outside of Manhattan, like 35 minutes. Like it's one of the kind of most, what do they say? Like it's one of the, it's kind of like, how Palo Alto is in San Francisco, like that whole area.
I'm not familiar with Palo Alto.
Okay. Well, it's just one of like the most expensive, affluent suburbs like in the country.
Okay.
So most of the people who live there, like their parents, like take the train every day, go to Manhattan, and they're like CEOs. They work in, they're doctors, have their own businesses, are in finance, things like that. And so my dad was an electrician, but he was very smart. He started buying property at a young age, and so he learned. His dad taught him that. So anyway, he was able to buy a home in this area. So, but I never really thought about it until I was like on the playground, maybe at 5 years old, and some little kid came up to me and was like, "You nigger," and I was like, oh, "My God, what is that?" And the way he said it, it was like that was the most defining big moment for me in saying, "Wow, whatever he's saying, like he thinks that I am. Like this is really bad." And even though that I in my immediate neighborhood never had an issue. Because it's funny, the more money people had, the less racist they were.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Because people who are already been successful aren't as interested in, like they've already they're more comfortable and confident, especially if you've come from generations of wealth. It was like the kids who were new immigrants, or from the side of town that wasn't as well off. And so they had learned this, I guess. I mean, so that was that. And then, the subtleties of it, like when it was time to date, it was only like, by the time I was in 5th grade or 6th grade, there were like 2 other Black kids. And they had this like in 5th grade where they passed around this list of like, who likes who. And I was talking to a really good friend of mine from 2nd grade, one of my best friends, Wendy Korn, and about that. And she goes, "Oh yeah, I remember that day, that week. That was the happiest day of my life because Guy Levine liked me." And I said, "Well, that was like the worst day for me because I remember like my name wasn't on the list. And when I asked why, the girls told me, well, you can only date Wayne Johnson or William Johnson or Wayne Tucker." And I was like, "I don't even like either one of them." So it was like another, and so, but overall, like the way I grew up, because I was in school and with people who were, and I understood race, but because and I understood that Black people were supposed to be worse, like, or lower or second, like that was what was being communicated. But because I was in school with kids and I was just as smart as them, I was like, this is kind of doesn't make any sense, because I was like, I'm just as smart as these kids, if not smarter. So whatever the world is saying, I am this. But what I have thought about since we brought up this conversation was, since things have happened recently, like it's made me see how maybe I wasn't affected as much, in very subtle ways, but it's because of my education, not just in school, but because like I could talk to anybody. I think I told you both sides. I could talk to anybody. I can go in any environment and I feel comfortable. I don't know if they're always comfortable. Now, if I go into like I've been into the ghetto or, community, and, I think that I don't feel as comfortable. Like, like I can't switch into like, hey girl, like I don't, hey girl, like that's not gonna, so culturally that's not, but there still is, like, I feel very comfortable around people, Black people, Hispanic people. Living in Miami has been great because I think it's like the brown city, and, so anyway, that's kind of a general background. And then I don't think, I hear a conversation, I think you said it, that people say, well, there is no structural racism. And they'll even say like, oh, look, some people have made it, but it's also because of those, being educated in that way, whether it's socially or being able to function, and as I talk to some Black people, they're like, they don't know how to, they don't understand I think I wrote it down here, that the education is about, not just about like book smart. It's like, how does the system work in America?
Right.
Things like conversations that I've had with my friends about money, investing, how do you make money? And those, so all of those things give you that, advantage. And then I wrote down, but then socially, there definitely is like a subtle thing. I wrote this down about like, I think I'm limited socially in subtle ways, that like if I went into an environment where it's like certain environments, I may be able to be okay. Like say it's a very successful, people are successful. If I'm dressed a certain way, if I talk a certain way, I could be maybe the one that would be allowed to be in that room. You know what I mean? But it would be, yeah, that it would have to be like, I'd have to kind of conform in that way. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. I don't know if it would be like in a subtle way. I think there's certain social settings that I would not be allowed in. Do you know what I'm saying? Or maybe be self-conscious about.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you. I hear that. Huh. We need to kind of we need to be chameleons a little bit, right? Because sometimes we have to dress up and be a certain way to be accepted in a certain group. And if we're playing that game, it's fine. But sometimes we just want to be known or accepted as ourselves. And so maybe that's a structural thing that we need to work through.
Yeah,
And then I
that's
also,
very well said. Mhm.
oh, thank you. And then I also heard you saying, like, just as far as Black people being able to speak, I mean, gosh, it is a white society. I'm not pretending that it's not. And so I'm talking about like somebody who is Black, who is able to kind of rise up into in a chameleon way to be able to speak to white people at their level is kind
Right.
of, at this point, the only way that they can feel accepted, which is really, really sad.
Yeah.
Um,
And then not even completely. Because I remember a guy saying to me not too long ago, someone I met who was working on my house, and he said something about, oh, you're Obama Black. Which was
that
interesting. And I
means
was like,
Oreo or
yeah.
something,
I was
right?
like, what does that mean? Well, he meant like Obama, how Obama could like, he did. He kind of went past color barriers, right? He could talk to anybody,
Yeah.
and but not everybody, right? There were people who were just like, oh, this is a great guy, and they could see, whatever. And then there were other people that were like, I cannot get past this. Like, this is, it was actually could be, what's the word? Something, like almost upsetting, right? Like
Wow.
who,
And why? Because of his Black skin, or just because he wasn't
I
being
think
true to
because
Black?
it's like, it's like, I don't know, maybe you can tell me better, but I think for some people it might be like, how dare, like if he's smarter, like someone thinks you're smarter than, like, this guy's Black and he's smarter than me.
Right.
Like, and it's so subtle, but we are so, conditioned. Have you heard of this woman who does the blue eyes, brown eyes thing?
I don't know.
Oh, Jane. Okay, I'll send it to you after. Back in 1968, she's been doing it for 50 years. Back in 1968, after Martin Luther King was
Oh my
killed.
gosh, I did that
Yeah,
experiment.
Jane
I
Elliott.
did hear
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. It's a great experiment because she does it in a classroom of third graders. And when you watch it, within 15 minutes of telling like the blue-eyed kids they're worse, you just see the kids like put their heads down
Hmm.
and they start to feel bad and they start to like retract, and then the other kids, the brown eyes, start saying, yeah, you're dumb, and it's like in 15 minutes. And so that's the psychological part that's been played on all of us, is that, that these ideas, which are made up, and if we're deliberately made up, uh, that they impermeate, the psyche of everybody. And that, I think that's what we're unpacking now. And some people, like I say, there's two conversations. There's a conversation where people say, like you're saying, let's talk, I want to listen. And there's the other side of the coin that says, shut up, I don't want to hear about it.
Yes. Oh yes, there's that.
As you said with your family, I want to hear more about what happened with your family. As you
Well,
said, you brought it up.
I'm going to, I've been talking a little bit about it in ways that I can, where I'm trying not to be offensive. I'm trying not to tell anybody, like, look at this is real, you know, like stop for a second and look. But this is what I wanted to just read to you, this one little part, because this, I'm stuck. I'm at a stuck point right here.
Okay.
So he was making a point to talk about white privilege is racist as it focuses on color instead of character. People are privileged not based on their circumstances, upbringing, and choices, not the color of their skin. It was just a point that was being made. Of course, okay, so this is what happened, is that I was called racist. I was
You, oh, like, oh, it's reversed, right? Like
yeah,
you're being racist.
I was being racist because I was speaking about the issues about the police brutality and that Black people are seen as being guilty before innocent. And so what came back to me was this. I'm going to read it again because it blows my mind. Okay.
Okay.
Because it's very logical and it's very well thought out. And it's
Yeah.
almost like everybody that believes this was given a paper to say exactly this. Do it again. Listen to it again. He was making a point that to talk about white privilege is racist as it focuses on color instead of character. People are privileged or not based on their circumstances, upbringing, and choices, not the color of their skin. So
Let's read it one more time because I really want to get this. I really want to.
I know, me too.
Maybe just do the first sentence. Like
Well, he was making a point that to talk about white privilege is racist as it focuses on color instead of character.
Okay.
So I think
we can take that apart because I mean, and it's interesting because there's another woman who does this talk. It's called White Fragility. Have you heard of that?
No.
And she's a really interesting woman. She's a sociologist, I think. She's been doing this work for years too. And she kind of addresses that very thing. And she says that the minute you bring up this conversation, you'll get the response that you said, because it's actually one way to shut down the conversation.
Yes. Right.
It's saying it doesn't exist. And so then therefore, we don't need to have this conversation. Let's just carry on as, usual. And it's really funny with Jane Elliott. One of the things she does, and I can send you the clip, there's a clip where she's standing in an auditorium and it's filled with white people. And she says, she's really funny. She's like a tough love kind of lady. And she goes, anyone in this auditorium who would like to be treated, and this is 20 years ago, like Black people in our society generally would like to be treated that way, stand up.
Yep.
Nobody stands up. And she goes, you didn't understand what I just asked you. If there's anybody in this room that would like to be treated in general the way they feel that our Black brothers and sisters are treated in society, stand up. Again, no one stands up. And she says, the fact that you're not standing up says, something's wrong. You don't want it for yourself, but yet you're not willing to say anything about it.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That makes it pretty clear.
Yeah. I mean, it's because I think it's easier to, and I totally understand, like, where someone like, was this your cousin or your brother who said that? You're dead. Okay. Whoever, let's just call him John. I understand where John's coming from, because, this is the unpacking of it, is that it's so difficult to see something if you haven't experienced it, right? It's that whole, like, whatever.
Well, like yes. And I'm going to stop you there because I know that this person has experienced it in a different way.
Tell me, is he Jewish?
No, and I may have to cut some of this out, like if I'm going to.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he has been, I guess, discriminated against as far as being kind of like a white, long hair, like a white guy, long hair, and having been harassed by the police for doing nothing wrong. So he feels very strongly that he's also been discriminated against, which makes his position even stronger in that this whole racial thing doesn't exist. because
Is
here's a,
his hair, well, is his hair longer now?
he still has long hair.
He still has long hair. And he's saying that it's happened to him frequently. And so he's saying it's not any different because of how he presents himself.
Not frequently. It hasn't
Mm-hmm.
happened frequently, but if we were traveling together and trying to go through customs or security, he will always be stopped because of his appearance. And one
Mm-hmm.
of the things that I've come up with is that he lives in this appearance of fuck the police, I'm gonna look the way I want. So,
Right.
he's got the long hair, he's like not well dressed, he doesn't present as like a high class person because he wants to be comfortable. He wants to just wear t-shirts and like kind of look like he just came off the beach after 5 nights of just like sleeping, like
Mm-hmm.
so that's his
Well, but in a way, it should kind of prove the point more. And what I mean by that is because, yes, he's not fitting into what is set up as how, if you want to be treated a certain way, right? So and there's extremes to that, right? There's like how he looks with his long hair. He could cut his hair. That's one difference between him and someone else is that he can cut his hair.
Thank you for saying that. Yes, he can.
And then that would change the whole, but he's, I think, and this is where
Well,
nuance.
let me just finish that sentence. He can cut his hair, but a black person can't change
Right.
his color. And
Exactly.
they would not want to change their color, hopefully.
Well, I'll tell you, some people would. I mean, it's like that's another deep thing. Like I think I said to my friend, this would be, information for him. I don't know, this person, if it would matter or not. But I asked a friend of mine, my other friend, Wendy Core, my best friend, because I was talking to her about this. And she said, well, I'm Jewish and Jewish people have been persecuted. And I said, yes, you're right. That's a horrible thing. I said, but nobody really knows you're Jewish unless you tell them. And she was like, that's true. And I said, also, let me ask you a question. Have you ever felt ashamed about being Jewish?
No, they feel very proud.
Right. And ask your friend, John, have you ever felt ashamed about being white?
I think he'll say no.
So that's the psychological, and I think there's nuance, meaning that there's an unpacking that people, that we each have to do, like with the psychological, I don't want to say responsibility, but awareness of the effects. And how are you going to rebuild, like those kids in that class, the one who did the blue-eye, brown-eye experiment? As soon as she said, okay, the game's over, everybody, go back to playing with everybody, they were all like, yay! Like they were so excited because they were able to throw off all of that. You have to watch it because you see them like mentally just being, not only were they mentally deflated, emotionally deflated, she had them do an exercise, like a rote exercise. And the kids that one day were told, your blue eyes, you're stupid. Like she did this whole thing, you have to watch it. When they did the exercise, they did it in half the time. Like they literally were dumber. They were fulfilling that prophecy of what she said. And then when they switched it around and told them they were smarter, they literally were smarter. And then she flipped the class the next day, and the same thing happened. So it's kind of like, the programming. And so you have a different programming that John may not, he's making a conscious choice, right? To say, F the system. So I'm going to show up this way. But
it makes you dumber.
What's that?
I said, but it makes you dumber.
What? Oh, saying F the system?
No, by being in that dialogue of like in that experiment, she's telling people or children that people with brown eyes are dumber.
Right.
Okay, if you're in that, you're dumber because you have all of that covering your pure beauty and your understanding of the real truth, which is brown eyes don't make you dumber. But if you're accepting that as truth, then that whole being, that whole cloak that you're holding now or covering yourself up with is that's why they were testing lower. Isn't that what you were saying?
Right. Well, they were, because she had said, she just started programming them, and she's done it with adults, the same thing. She'll put them in, they have to wear a collar, and half the people who have the collars on, and it's by eye color, are treated like being, talked down to, and then the other kids are given privileges. And actually you see something in human nature. where people start to right away kind of like the fact that they're like, oh, I'm the one who's getting the preferential treatment, and those people they are kind of dumb. It's these subtle things that we start responding to. But
Wow.
yeah, I think that someone like your friend John is, you don't want to look at it because it's almost like erasing history too, right? Like, because there are three prongs. Like, for example, like right after slavery, I was watching, there's a movie called Uncle Tom's Cabin, I think it was called. Have you heard of that one? And they did a movie like right around Jim Crow, that they started made these movies that showed like Black slaves being happy. And they started this narrative that slavery wasn't that bad, because actually they were pretty happy.
Oh, wow.
So it was like, they call it whitewashing slavery. And so sometimes when people say, oh, you're talking about race, you're bringing up white privilege, it's because there's just like not wanting to look at it, but also not wanting to even look at history, like either past or present. So, because there are three prongs. This is my feeling. Like I was thinking about this. There's three prongs to this whole racial thing. It's like, one is systemic, right? So systemically, yes, there was redlining. I don't know if your friend John knows about that redlining, where, you know what redlining is?
Gosh, I don't even know. So,
Okay, redlining is because, okay, so they went around and the banks would take a map and actually redline around certain areas that they wanted to segregate by race. This was during what's it called, Jim Crow. And then the banks would not lend money to people, black people in those areas. So it was a very subtle way of, and I mean, all you have to do is look at America and look at, how things are. I think, what's her name? What's the comedian, the blonde one? I forgot her name. Really funny, blonde comedian. Blonde, like really sassy. God, I can't think of her name. Chelsea Handler. She does a really good special on it. She said, because she's wealthy, she's successful, she lives in Hollywood Hills. And then she did this thing where she went and drove like out of her neighborhood, which she hardly ever did. And she went to like the Latin part of town. She's like, oh my God, I'm self-segregating.
Oh.
Like, she didn't even realize she was living in and it's like, if you're in your own, I don't know about where John lives, but it's like, if you open your eyes at all, you can see the estate of things. Now, how we got there, that's another thing that people talk about. They're like, well, why? People work hard, or they have goals, or like you said, everyone's given the same advantages, then why wouldn't they be? Well, I mean, I just look at my own life, like I said, and how there's no way that I would be living the way that I'm living. Well, not no way, but education is very important.
There's somebody they're throwing stuff around.
Oh, that's Robert. I just go outside. And then the other, so that's the systemic part, like an education, like you go to schools, like, around the country, and you see that they're segregated. I mean, it's just the way it is. There's some, magnet schools or whatever. So there's some systemic stuff that's any intellectual is not going to ignore that. Now, some people say like, hey, just as many white people have been killed by the police or as blacks. And I'm not saying there's not nuance. And I think that's really important, that we have these conversations that are non-binary.
Mm-hmm.
Because people are binary, like it's either this or it's that. I think that there's nuances that you can look at and say, is there some responsibility that people who are not, making more of their life need to not just take, but like have a real moment of like, yeah, okay, what part and how can they be supported to be able to, move forward, to look at what's happened. And so that's I say, like, there's an individual psychology. And even like when I was saying personally, there's a, seeing our own, like those kids who took it in and believed it, that took in, like, and I'll give you a simple, and this is probably true for you too, Dion. Like, if you were thinking, I wrote this down, did you ever feel like, oh, if I was thinner or taller or blonder, like that would be better? Did you ever feel that way?
All of those, all of the time. Yes. All of those that you mentioned, all of the time.
Yeah. So when you talk about someone like to John, so there's a whole hierarchy of like, what is the most successful, acceptable physical image, right? And so if you're a powerful white older whatever man with a suit on, and that's the highest level, right? And then just go right down the chart, a woman who's tall and blonde and beautiful, then now to a dark woman, a dark hair, dark eyes, a little chubby woman, and so all of these things, like you can have
I
a
don't want to
bigger
be a chubby
conversation.
woman.
Where I'm saying like thin, chubby, is your hair long? Is it short?
Yeah,
Do you
there's
have a
always
huge nose?
things that are we would want to be because we think that it's better.
And so
And
you could say to someone like John, right, that, okay, say, let's put white privilege aside. But is there a privilege to being better looking, period? Like, or not better looking,
well, there is.
falling into an image of beauty that society has said this is what beautiful is, or a man who is success. Of course there is. Like, is he gonna, so the whole, white privilege falls into that, because most people aren't going to say, oh yeah, the most successful image in society is a dark-skinned, fat, black man that's balding. Like, nobody's gonna. Now they may say Oprah, but she's a whole nother, I think she's someone people feel safe with. I think she's she's an enigma.
Yes, and she's created that for herself to
Right,
be that for
right.
people so that she
Yeah,
can be a voice that is not
yeah.
aggressive or too violent or too black for people to listen to.
And
So
she's also an interesting woman if you hear her
trilogy.
talk about race, because she says she never, I think I heard her say something like she never thinks of herself like, she doesn't look at people like that. She really is someone who brings her personal character. Like, she's hot, vibrating on a different level, I think,
Yeah.
because she's like, because it's not a hang up to her, it's not a hang up to everyone else. And you know what, Dion? Could that be true for everybody? Of course it could be. But when you are like those children and you take it in and you believe it, then, and so someone could say, yeah, that's something they need to work in their beliefs and change that. But how do you shake those things off? How do you tell a woman who's fat and not the ideal beauty, how do you make her really feel beautiful? So this is the inner work, and there's the systemic, and then what was the other thing I wrote down? Psychological, and then the social, like I said, the subtle social, like John, for example. Okay, I love John, like John, when it comes to his friends and dating, who does he date?
It's not
What
really,
type of people?
well, it's not a relevant question because he's married, but
Or friends. What does
well,
Facebook profile
listen,
look like?
listen, these are the nuances because yeah, he has mostly white people in his life, as do I.
Yeah, yeah,
However, that
yeah,
night that we got in a fight or an
yeah,
argument, he was saying that his black friend, get this,
yeah,
was
yeah.
saying that everything is fine in America, that there is no racism, and that
Mm.
everybody's just talking all this trash, and that
Wait,
they.
did you say his black friend? No, just like he said. He said
I
his.
did.
I've checked. Wait, listen. I've checked with my black friend. Okay, and he's speaking for all of. He told me he's speaking for all the spokesman
I
that this
know.
is not real. This is
Well, first of all, he could have been lying. Like, first of all,
no, but
that
it could be
black
true.
that
Yeah.
black friend might have just been lying to make this guy happy
Mm,
or feel
mm,
not
mm,
uncomfortable in his
mm.
presence. Who knows what the truth is?
Right. Or the other side of it. And it's funny because I believe in nuance. So I listen to a lot of people's points of view. And there actually are some black scholars that have made that point.
Yes.
And some of the points I agree with. But if you were to really go back and agree with, in the sense of, for them, that is the case, right? Because it's always based on your own experiences. Because it's for them that may be true. Because if you were to go back and what's the word? If you were to really dissect if you were to look at their story and how they ended up where they are, I would bet my money on the fact that they had a good education. I
Wow.
would bet my money on the fact that they had someone in their life who was like, don't let that get in the way. You're a great person. You're smart. You can do anything you want. And so they ran, so they had like those third graders, they had different input. And so they didn't succumb to the psychological part of it, which is definitely, it's a part of it. It's like if you're in an abusive relationship, someone grows up in a house where there's abuse. that is going to have an effect on them. Now you can turn around and say, hey, get your shit together. That was then, this is now. But, you know, if you really have compassion for someone, you'll be willing to find out, well, how can, instead of just kicking them to the side and saying, sucks for you, you'll be able to like, well, what can I do to be part of the solution?
Mm.
If there is one, you know. So his one friend saying that, it'd be interesting to see what his, because they did a study on like blacks that came from the Caribbean, like Jamaicans and blacks that were born in the United States, and they found that the immigrants are, you know, are more successful, and the children of immigrants. So like say you came from Jamaica and then you have a child in the United States. So they're both now, to the naked eye, they look the same, like they're black,
Right.
but they were more successful. But they also found that they had two parents in the home. They also found that their value system was based on, you know, hard work. Also, if you came from Jamaica, like my good friend who's from Jamaica told me, she goes, Karen, when I was growing up, everyone who was in my life that was successful was black. She went to the doctor, they were black. She went to the lawyer, they were black. So her whole concept of, it wasn't like it can't do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense.
Psychology. And so John, with his friend, his one black friend, which again, you know, like,
Look, hey, let's not put him down for that. Maybe he has two
yeah,
black friends, maybe he has 10
right,
black friends. You know,
right,
maybe he's got more black friends than me. Hey,
yeah,
I don't have that many black friends, you know.
right, right. And I'm not putting him down. I guess what I'm saying is,
What I
that,
hear you saying, and what I think is the deal is that just because that one person says it, it makes him right. It's like, yes, you just convinced me that I'm right because yes, it is okay. We're saying the same thing, right?
right. Well, and to think of that there's no long-term effects too. And this is the other thing I started writing down when we were, these are just little things like you, maybe I feel like people could have connected on an emotional level and it would be like, oh, okay, now, wow, I can imagine that. Like, for example, is this something about being black? And again, I don't know if his friend and maybe his friends surround himself. He might be that, I call it the Tootie. Like Tootie, remember there was a show called Facts of Life and Tootie was the only black character.
Oh
And like
yeah.
that's who I was, you know. And so the Tootie effect is when you're used to being that person in the room, you are a chameleon, right? But anyway, the difference, like for someone to see what the psychological effects could be, like I wrote down here, is that, you know, when you're being black, you don't have a culture. There's not a real culture.
What do you mean by that?
There's no like, well, or I should say, any culture that there is, all begins like when I did my ancestry chart. You know, as soon as you go back to like 18, whatever it is, that's a dead end because that's when there was the beginning of slavery. So there is no family. Like I don't know how far can you trace your family tree back. Have you done it? Or
I have
you're
not done that. I know that
uh,
my most of my family on my dad's side comes from Russia.
oh, interesting.
Yeah, and Rob's family also comes from Russia.
Hmm. Interesting. Are they Jewish, Russian Jews?
Yeah.
Okay. So you probably have like Ashkenazi, what is it called? Ashkenazi. You've never done your DNA.
No,
And
no.
your mom's side?
I don't know that much about her side. I know that they were European. So I've
Hmm.
heard that I have some French, some
Interesting.
Italian, some Irish.
Hmm.
I
Huh.
don't know.
Well, that's interesting. But so when you grew up culturally, did you have a bat mitzvah? Did you practice, are you Jewish in that way? Because your mom's Jewish or no, your dad?
No, my
Okay.
dad was raised Jewish, but I believe that when he married my mom, he was willing to give up his religion. I don't think that he was that into being Jewish. So I
Hmm.
think it was a release for him and the ability to marry the wife that he loved and fell in love with, even if his family didn't agree because she wasn't a Jew.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting that your dad had that. So did you feel growing up like what was your culture?
So I was raised Christian, and I
Like
mean,
you think
that's,
it's
I love that you're talking about culture because this is the conversation. Like we need to learn about each other's cultures. And
mm-hmm.
I didn't have that much of a culture as far as religion. I just, I accepted that God is omnipresent and everywhere, somehow the lesson came to me that I understood that we are all blessed, that we are all part of this wonderful universe, and this earth is completely giving and full of abundance. Like I just somehow I I got that, and I'm lucky.
Right.
But I think I've
Right.
also been searching for it too, you know.
Yeah. And
Um,
did you like ever, like for you, for race, did you ever like identify, think about like being like, because I heard someone say this, interesting, this is where I like to have the cross conversation. They said that people who are white never really look in the mirror and think I'm white. They're just like, I'm Dion. And they only feel a conscious of race when there's someone of another race around. Is that true?
hmm. I think that could be true for everyone, maybe just whites, because we're always used to being around white people. So
Right.
when we
Mm,
do have somebody of another race around us, we
mm,
definitely become more aware of the
mm,
difference of the person,
mm.
whether it's Black or Indian
Right.
or Cuban or
Right.
whatever it
Yeah.
is, But for me, the whole racism conversation was not, it did not envelop my life. What
Mm.
more enveloped my life was kind of classes, or just being able to have, like, I had everything I ever needed. And so my funny
Right.
story, and it's funny because, like, who's the interviewer here? Like, I'm supposed to be interviewing you.
You're going outside. You're like, wait a second. Well, we're having a conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm moving.
So
Okay.
I had an epiphany when I was younger, because, and this is just a silly story, but I grew up in a beautiful, huge yard that my parents still own.
I've been there.
Yes. They built their home there. It's pretty much a paradise in the middle of Miami, Florida, which is a paradise in and of itself. And
Right.
I grew up with exotic animals and just love coming out of everybody. I was talented and smart. I pretty much had everything that I ever thought. Like, I never even thought about what I had because I had it, right? And so one day it just occurred to me, I think I was in high school or early college years, where I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm weird. Like, not everybody grew up with a huge Eldabra tortoise and horses and tennis courts and ostriches and like all of the things that my life had. I just kind of assumed that everybody's life was just as weird and just as full. I never realized that I had so much, so much more than everybody else, or not everybody else, but just so much more. I had a very full life because so many things were given to me.
And you can say to someone like John, like what you just said right there is the epitome of white privilege, because it's like white privilege means never having to think about race
Never.
ever.
Oh gosh, I didn't even have to think about food, clothes, anything.
Right. And even, and here's the kicker, that I didn't have to think about those things either. I mean, I grew up, like I told you, in a wealthy environment. We had our own beach and yacht club where I spent every summer just like swimming at the beach and yacht club. I could see from my house boats. We would go out in Long Island Sound, go boating. Like we were living a bit, but even with all of those comforts, it was made clear to me that somehow, and this is the psychological part, that you're not as beautiful. You're not the same, right? So it's like being, like I said, the dating thing, or I didn't believe they're not a smart thing, but somehow you're less.
By
And
Because you were Black?
right,
Wow.
somehow, even though you have all the accoutrement, as they would say, of and living side by side, but it's like, yeah, but let me just tell you, and it's a subtle thing, and white privilege is like, and this is why this is such a great conversation, because what Black people, and I can only imagine how I was in the ghetto. I didn't grow up in the ghetto. I didn't grow up having to worry about this or that, uh, money, and I still don't. I actually, I never have to worry about money. Like that's not an issue for me. Thank God, right?
Thank God.
Although, I've worked for it as well, but it's this, it's these subtle things that you don't like I would say to your friend John, did you ever feel like because you were white it was going to work against you professionally? And he could say, well, yeah, like getting back to the hair, but he could cut his hair, And I'll give you another thing, like back to hair. For Black people, especially Black women, I don't know if you know this, like they call it that hair. Oh my God, Dion, it's such a big thing. Like, why do you think Black women straighten their hair? Even though that's changing, because it made you more acceptable. It actually makes people more comfortable. So if you have like, if I had a big afro, right? And I came to John's house, or I don't know, you know what I mean? Like his family's gonna be like, whoa, versus having my hair straight.
Hmm.
So if I wore my hair, I mean, I can't grow a big afro, but I can grow curly. But if you wear your hair just naturally, there's a shame. We were even taught to feel ashamed of our hair. It's not beautiful to have, you know, and I have like, my hair is like a soft curl, but the kinkier it gets, the more unacceptable it is. The dark, you seem like, I'm like, my family of course has, you know, European blood as well, but the darker you get, the harder it is. So there's like a whole, and that's something that if you're really, really, really dark, then you're going to have, every time you step into a room, it's going to be the first thing people see. And your friend John, if he doesn't think that's true, he's living in a freaking dreamland, because it's just, if you, you know, I was, yeah, that's,
Yeah.
it's like
No,
never having to think about that, feeling like, and also something else that someone said recently, like when you turn on the TV when you were growing up, everyone you saw on TV
was white.
was white.
Yeah.
And so you saw reflected, like, I mean, think of how powerful that is. Like you could be anything. You could be a Charlie's Angel. You could be, you know, you could be the Bionic Woman. You could be all these things. But then, like you see you know, to see someone Black, it was always, this is the Black show. And even
Right.
Robert and I, he'll say sometimes, my husband, he's Colombian, but he'll say, like last night, my daughter was watching Star Wars for the first time, and I hadn't seen Star Wars before. And I was looking at the show, and I said, aren't there any Black people in this galaxy? Because,
Apparently not.
like, you know, Robert's like, why do you always have to say that? I said, because I noticed that. Because think of what it would be like where everywhere you go, you're invisible. You don't exist.
Wow.
So how can you feel included in the same way? Psychologically. And that's not something that, and it's not the victim thing, because I've heard people like, oh, it's a victim thing. No, it's like those kids that are in that class when you're programmed, and not only Black people think like that, white people do too, just not aware of it. Like you said, being thin and blonde and tall is the ideal. And
Well,
so,
the whole psychology thing is really interesting because I was getting very in tune with the things that I was thinking about myself growing up. I never thought I was good enough. Like I look back and I was so awesome, you know, I was this like bundle of energy. I could do anything I wanted. I just had the world at my fingertips, but my psychology was that I wasn't good enough, I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't pretty enough. I felt very like I would never be able to do anything. Like I really didn't. And that's me. Like that's like I had it all, dude, and I didn't even
right.
know it.
And maybe that, like, I would say, like, in my own, um, I would say that is a human experience, you know, like that we all share, like this, you know, like the Buddhists say, suffering, or, you know, and enlightenment. So and that's where, like, I mean, I totally am aware that race is a construct, because we are 99.999, whatever it is, the same. So that's the truth, right? So like what you felt and what you experienced as a human being, that's normal. But these other layers, like we were talking about in the beginning of this interview, like what are the other layers that we say, who am I, why am I here, are the shared experience. So we can, I mean, unpacking all of it, and I think getting to that place where people can be more like, I feel this too, like just what you just said, like that can be a universal feeling that people have. And then there's days that you feel like, you know what, I am fucking awesome. Like there's that side too, you know, you're like, actually I'm awesome. And right, like catch me what hour of the day, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, midday you're like fine, you know, like great. And you know, like it's, I'm sure growing up you had that, because like even when I say that I had these feelings growing up, there were a lot of times that I was like, I'm awesome. And that's the human experience.
That's the human, and hopefully all of us can feel that way at least at some points of the day and try to have those feelings and moments become more of a part of our day versus the other way, you
And
know?
even for I love talking about your friend John, because I think even going back to him, if John were to really examine himself or anyone, and to say socially, oh, I know what it's like and I get it all. And yet I have like, if there's 12% Black people in the United States, then if you really were living like kind of a diversified, you would have that many, interactions, experiences, if we were living in that, a diversified world, right? Because he's saying it doesn't exist. So if it doesn't exist, there shouldn't be these limitations. I don't know if that's a good point, but I think that, like, really to be honest with himself and say, am I really, like, I have friends who are like, I'm colorblind. I'm like, of course you're color. Why should you be colorblind? Like, I think differences are beautiful, but if you're saying that you don't see, and that you completely are not affected by it, you just haven't probably taken inventory. And you know what? It's not easy, but it's a lot harder to live like in a delusional, you know, um, like just telling yourself it doesn't exist. When I was born in,
I think it's a lot easier to
yeah,
tell
oh
your
yeah, it's a lot easier. And I think that if you, and John, unfortunately, and unfortunately, this, if you look at history again, the system, the way it's set up, was built for not just white men, wealthy. This is very important. People understand the history. Wealthy white men. And what happened in that system is they turned poor whites and Blacks against each other.
yes.
And they were like, why don't you guys keep fighting it out and we'll keep doing what we're doing. We'll hold on to the property. So you talk about systemic racism. They say the average Black family has 1/10 of the wealth that a white family does. That's because there was no wealth building, right? That, after slavery, it was like, they said the biggest mistake that was made, and this is actually a Black scholar who is in defense of racism, he's saying it isn't as debilitating. And I like that. Like, he's saying, like, in other words, there's nuance. Like, it's not black or white. that that he said the biggest mistake that was made was that after slavery, they should have said, here's your land to the Black people, here's your mule, and you know what? Make the most of your life. Like, you're free.
Yeah.
That would have been, but
Well,
what happened instead was Jim Crow. And Jim Crow was like a law that was written that said, listen, we cannot, like now what do we do? So they wrote laws that actually started the original policing system, which said we have to control Black people to live with them. And so that's when they started. If you look at the history, the policing, it was like a way to control. And so if you look at, like, to say that none of that like would have a long-term effect, because like when I was born, or shortly after I was born in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, there was still in place like this overt segregation.
oh, definitely. Definitely.
So for someone, I keep going to John, but he's perfect because he speaks for so many people. And to but the reason that he doesn't want to talk about it again is because the only way to keep it going is to not talk about it.
Hmm.
Like, it's like the minute, if you shut someone down in the conversation, then, it continues. But the question would be,
Well, yeah, that the system continues, but the conversation stops.
right, right.
Yeah.
And then this way we don't have to, and, for him to ask those questions, if he ever felt like it was going to work against him being white. Is he
Well,
going to say, yeah?
no, I love that. I think that that's like really good, like things for us to swallow. And also during that night, not only was I called racist, but closed-minded.
Um,
And I was like, wow,
yeah.
like I can't fight against that
But you know
because
what that is? And I'll send you the white fragility thing. That's all language to shut you up.
yes,
Okay.
I know.
Which is
And
perfect.
then
And then they end up becoming the victim. In the end, the last wrong of that conversation is, I'm the victim. You see, I'm the victim. This is where the conversation goes.
oh, right.
I'm the victim. And so now you've completely silenced the conversation. And you know what? And I'm not, like, people like John, I'm not angry at him. I understand. Like I told you earlier, I understand. I really do. Because I can only imagine if I was brought up every day and you just have one perspective, thank God, I was a flight attendant, I think I told you. So I've traveled the world. I sailed across every sea. We used to sail across from, Greece, the Caribbean, all over the Mediterranean. I've met a lot of people. That has shaped my way I see the world.
Yeah,
But
and
if
let
I
me
had
interrupt.
never, yeah, yeah, go
I was
ahead.
going to say, not only have you seen and met a lot of people, you've had such confidence in yourself that you're a singer. You're open enough to give that vulnerable part of yourself, your voice, out to the world and out to others. And we're like, lots of people just can't even get there,
Yeah.
so
Engage. I find I want to engage with others. And I think that's the difference. It's not about like how many black or white friends you have. I think it's like whoever you have in your life to truly, engage, to be able to listen. I think he was projecting about you being closed-minded, you know?
it really hurt me. Like, it felt like a dagger in my heart, because I try to live my life as open-minded as freaking possible. I
Yeah.
go to lengths to
Yeah.
be open-minded. So when that is coming to me, I really think about, what is he really saying, and how could he think that? So that night I ran
Yeah.
away crying, actually. And I wrote this text to everybody that was there. That's what I was looking. That's why I was looking down. I was trying to find the text.
Yeah.
I wrote, I will always be thankful for tonight, because it was tonight that I realized that I need to make, no, that I need to figure out a way to make a difference in this world. It is
Hmm.
important to me to help spread peace and acceptance in this time of hate and separation. My heart hurts tonight for myself, but it is nothing compared to the hurt that I see. Being called closed-minded hurts because I would like to learn more and open my mind. Being called racist hurt, but only because I am weak. Thank you for letting me see how strong I need to be.
Oh, that is so beautiful. And what did they say? Crickets?
Well, some crickets, and some like, oh, but I love you. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, which
You
is
are such a
nice.
gift because you are, and if you know why you are able to be the way you are, Deanna, is because you've done, you've gone inside, you've done work in yourself. You've done the human, work. It's funny, last night, this, when Star Wars was on, I was like, I fell asleep and I woke up and I heard like a message in my head. It was so strong. And it said, probably because the Star Wars thing was happening, but it said, Earth is the only place in all of the galaxies where you can find love, where you can experience love.
Wow.
And that's why it's so special. It's also like a very desolate place, but it's like a treasure chest to be able to find it because of all these other things that come in the way. But like it's really, and I felt like it was a message from like a wise, because it was, when you get these messages that it was like it wasn't coming from me. I was like really calm. I was like, ding, Earth is the only place that you can find love. And I was like, what does that mean? And because you have done that, like, I mean, when you think about back to the original, who are we and why are we here? And you know what? Not everybody wants to ask that question. I've had people who get very uncomfortable by those two questions. They don't want to go, and that's fine, but they don't want to, you know what I mean? They don't want to, they're like, what? Huh? What? Oh. Well, this is too heavy. But I think that you've done so much of that and with such a pure heart that you are melting, you present yourself in that way. And it probably makes them uncomfortable because they're like, it is so hard to look at that. It's so hard to bring up this conversation because it is, they know in there somewhere that there's some truth. I mean, look at the history of like when the people had slaves. Like there's some people recently, like they'll say things and I'm like, who would we have been in relationship 200 years ago? Like when I think about them, would they have been someone like, my slaves are happy, and let's keep this thing going. This is working for
I'm getting
me.
a lot of work done
I'm
here.
doing a
I'm
lot
gonna
of work.
hire
My
another one.
kids are taken care of. I live in a really nice house. And think about it. People did for hundreds of years were okay with it. were okay with seeing people in chains in the street because they were like, well, they're not really people, you know.
Well, and yes, and all like yes. And I feel that lots of the people that are holding on to that and not seeing that there needs to be change is that they are also in chains.
Yeah,
They
oh
are
yeah,
also holding
yeah.
on to not only the structures that were built for them to be like held under, but like their own chains that they're not even trying to get out of, you
I
know?
agree with you because I feel like when I did my DNA test, my family, when we did it, I'm exactly 50-50. 50% African, West African blood, and 50% European, English, Irish, and a little bit of Scottish, right?
Wow.
So, like, but that's the history of America because
Yeah.
it's this, like you said, it was the slave owner and the slave, but they were both chained to the same thing. Because as human beings, you're both like, they both, the master knew that his slaves, like, you know, deep down inside, who likes being a slave? Like, you know what I mean? Like, there was some part in their human, although, you know, they were functioning like, no, no, this is okay, this is fine, we're respectable people, you know. But you're right, and that's where I think it fits into this whole thing of human history of like being able to unchain ourselves, whether it's with race or whether, like you said, even as an individual and like working through your own, like, you know, self-doubt, limitations, etc. um, that, you know, it's a much bigger thing. But yeah, I think, you know, kudos to you. Keep having this is a conversation. It's like the Me Too conversation, right? When it came out, people were like, oh, these women, like, it blew up, and people are like, oh, well, maybe they're over. Why didn't they say something before? Like, the whole defensiveness that comes when you present something that is uh, a difficult truth. You know, you could say it's not there, and then you're gonna, like, we're having cancel culture right now, even around race. Like, so we have this other wave that's happening. It's like, and I think people like John, and it's funny, I don't think I told you this in the beginning. I was married, Robert's my second marriage. We've been married now for a long time. My first marriage was to an Irish man from
Hmm.
Ireland, 100% Irish, met in college, um, college sweethearts, and lovely man, like lovely heart. He came from Ireland, and in Ireland, he was just a regular, he was one of the mill, you know, just another Irish guy, nothing special. And his family was working class Irish. And he came to the United States. And he was tall, he had green eyes, good looking, had the little accent. Man, I remember him saying to me, Karen, when I walk in the door, I can tell like doors are flying open for me. Now, he was hardworking, he was educated. I'm going to give him that. But the package he came in gave him a huge advantage. And it also kept building his confidence because in each interaction, he was getting more of a positive feedback loop, right? And recently, when I had this conversation around race, he ends up now he's a coach. He's been very successful, but he kind of really bought into the American dream in some of the exploitive ways because after he started seeing, you know, the benefits, he went into sales, like financial sales and stuff. Anyway, he kind of reminded me of John, where he's like, you know what, I'm a self-made man and this and that. And so when I brought this whole thing up with him recently, he was like, it's race is not real. People who feel this race is real have a victim mentality. And I reminded him of what he told me. And I reminded him that when he first started working in the financial district, he in his office, he had a picture of me on his desk. And people said several times, what is she? They're like, what is she? What's your wife? Where's she from? Which is a question I've got my entire life. Where's she from? And he's like, oh, she's African American or whatever. And they were like, oh, like that. Oh. And when he saw that, he came home and told me he was disturbed because he grew up in Ireland. And in Ireland, they really didn't have racism because everyone was Irish. And he said, you know, Karen, I think I'm just going to take it down. Like, not because I'm not proud of you, but I just feel like it keeps becoming like a conversation. And he felt like it was going to be a liability, like, you know, professional liability. And so he did. But even with all that, he's kind of put it to the side. And I think it's like John with his like thing of seeing other people who are successful, who have made it. their own success, or other people are like, well, listen, look at so-and-so. He made it and he's black, so what's the problem?
Right.
But if they really take a moment and sit with it and say, if they were coming into this country as an immigrant, you can ask John this, and you had a choice of being from West Africa and as dark as night, educated, same education, let's say, same education, same family, or a tall Irish guy with green eyes that's good looking and has a brogue. Which one do you think would you choose? Which one would have would there be any advantage to either? Then he'll know what white privilege is.
Okay.
Because we know what his answer is going to be. If he says black, jet black, he's just a liar, you know. Right? I don't care if he's built. I don't care who the guy is. I don't care if he's a celebrity. Like Chris Rock has a joke. I don't know if you ever saw it. Chris Rock says, he was talking about racism a long time ago. He said, any white person in here, he said, would not trade places with me. He said, and I'm rich.
Yeah.
Still would not want to trade places.
Wow.
And do you think that there's truth in that? Like if you were to poll people, they were being honest?
I think so. Yeah.
Or like we said, back to if you're tall, blonde, and skinny, or short, dumpy, and with, thinning hair. It's those things are obvious. Is there any other questions you have for me?
Well, I do, but I know that this has been a really long conversation, so maybe we could end here and do another one another time, because I wanted
Yeah.
to go into mantra and like
Okay.
all of that, but that's maybe another conversation.
Yeah. Well, this was good. I think we covered, and you can edit it out anyway. And again, I appreciate you, Dion, as a soul sister.
Thank you.
Soul sister, I think we both approach life that way, I think people say they don't see color. I think what we can really say instead of someone saying that is, I see you. Like I see people. I just see people for who they are. And I don't, I'm working on not letting anyone's physical appearances, whether it be color or any other physical attribute, like that would be really evolved, right? To not let that influence even John with his long hair, like to meet John and not care that his hair is long or that he didn't shower today. How would John feel if people were like, I don't care? Maybe that's why he's rebelling against it a little bit, like just kind of put it in people's faces. But what if somebody was like, what are you like? Who are you? I'm interested in who you are. I don't care about any of that.
Yeah, that's cool. That would be a really nice world to live in, being less judged, because then we can be more ourselves. And I'll just tell you, like, this is kind of like a tangent, but something that I've thought of in the past is that if we had the ability to feel more certain in being ourselves, wouldn't we all be so much more different than each other? Because I see girls dressed the same, having the same style and outfits, talking the same, having the same hair. People feel more comfortable in big groups because being such an individual takes a certain amount of strength and self-confidence to be able to be yourself in a world where every single person is looking at you and judging you. So of course we want to become what is acceptable, and so we shrink into this semi person that we can be so much bigger and so much make people more uncomfortable because we're so self-assured and we look different. I want to start looking different than everybody else because I want to be me.
Woo! Yeah.
I don't want to be
Right.
white. I don't want to be this like white girl. Like but also I want to be natural. And this is what I look like. I'm not going to dye my hair pink or purple. I'm not going to like get tattoos or piercings. Like, I don't want to do that either. That's not the way in which I want to look different. The way I want to look different is to enrich myself and be close to spirit as I can, so that can present to the world in my own manifestation of me.
Yeah. That's so, I love that. I think that's wow. Yeah, that's really beautiful. They show up, it's like your own, I think it's even like vibration, like vibing your own unique, like you said, being courageous enough And I love that. That was well
Yeah.
said, Jen.
Thank you. Yeah, we can all define ourselves in our own individual ways, but we have to support each other in that. So,
Right. And one of the things I'm doing with my group that I work with the women who are supporting each other with different art projects. And
you want to say the name of the group?
the group well, it's Wise Women. And I'm working in a program right now. I'm learning about emotional intelligence a lot. And I'm getting I might get certified, but I don't even know if I need to do someone's program because
Okay.
all the things that I'm learning and like when you like you had said, the more you know yourself and the more you're aware of who you are and you can bring that forward, especially the fullness of who you are, right? Like you shared some things like, being sincere about like our vulnerabilities, our doubts. And there's so much beauty. There's so many gifts in that space that we can be in as human beings and kind of throw off all those layers of protection that, like you said, we can expand as people. And I think it's Brene Brown. Do you know Brene Brown?
Yes, I do.
So I think what she said, it's a great place to end. She said that, we've been led in the world by the head, the mind, the rational mind, right? Like that part of the brain, the left brain, and that she feels like the next wave is going to be being led by the heart. And I would add like our emotions, the awareness of like, what does that even mean, and then there can be a world that's like you said, people show up and they're more themselves. We can support each other. We're not so guided by fear. Like that's what's been unleashed now is fear. But bring it out, bring out the dragon. Let's see it. Right. So I think that it's all good. And I'm grateful to have this conversation with you.
Aw, I'm
Yeah.
grateful to have this conversation with
Oh,
you.
and my thing is, sorry, my thing that I'm working on it's really about everyone. Like back to when you said being yourself, it's finding your voice, singing your song as a metaphor for life, like
Hmm.
singing your song, finding out what that is. And, when you sing, there's flats, there's you're on pitch, there's like lots of things that happen. But the best singers are the ones that sing like truthfully or honest and connected to their emotions and are just, like you said, like transparent and show up as themselves.
Yes. Well, gosh, I just want to keep talking just for a second because that brought up a quote that I love, which is if you love somebody, the way to love them is when they forget their song to remind them what their song is. So we can reach out to people and really remind them what it is that they've forgotten to sing and how they've forgotten to be because they've wanted to ignore themselves or hide themselves because of all the hurt that's coming, you know.
Beautiful. Thank you, honey. This is a beautiful conversation. And I'm again, isn't it great that we can have this conversation in this way too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm happy about it. It uplifts me, and I'm just happy to know you and be part of your life, and you're
Yes,
part of
you
mine.
too. You too, sister. Okay, well, you have a great day.
Okay. You too.
Bye.
All right. Well, that's Karen. She's amazing. She sings with her whole heart. She's a mantra singer. And I'll start sharing more about mantra because it's been a huge part of how I've been able to connect back to myself and my own voice. Um, I was always a trained dancer and high level gymnast. So I was always being looked at, and I was pretty good at what I did, but I never spoke. I never let I wasn't projecting my voice. I was showing people my body and my tricks and maybe my connection to music, but not the voice that came out of me. I was always a silent performer. And I also went into the visual arts afterwards, which again is speaking through art. But I actually have lungs and vocal cords and a mouth and my own way of talking, and I am learning to express it. So thank you for being here with me. And I thank you for being you.